Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to another episode of Neptune Sunday. It's your boy V Moss here. Vogue, what's good?
Happy Neptune Sunday, everybody.
See, can you tell that Vogue is like she's in a different space today, and we'll get into that later, but her energy is it's a very her energy is very specific to the conversation that we're gonna have today. But welcome.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you listening after the fact, today is Sunday, January 22nd, just for context. Before we get into today's Neptunes related topic, let's get through a little bit of the current events. So, I wanted to make sure that everyone knew about Fashion Week. Obviously, it's a big deal. I mean, not necessarily to me, I'm not really that big into fashion, but it's a big deal culturally, right? I'm not in. Are you into the fashion? Like, I just feel like all
Yeah.
these fashion weeks are just people just wearing crazy stuff. It's not my vibe.
So I'm into fashion, like as an individual. The thing is that I found out about Fashion Week is that like the models and stuff who end up showing up, like they essentially like pay to be in Fashion Week.
Right.
So it's basically just a lot of people stunting, which I care less about. Like I just like people's organic fashion. I feel like, Pharrell's the ultimate example of that. Like he has good style,
Right.
good collection. So I did not pay attention to Fashion Week that happened recently.
But I think that's the difference. Like fashion, like high-end fashion week stuff is different than what you said in style, like personal style. Like, yeah, like
Street
whatever
style.
you
Yeah.
got, you got your fits together and they look appropriate. But so the reason why I'm talking about it is obviously P was at Paris Fashion Week. It's courtside at the NBA's Detroit Pistons versus the Bulls game, sitting courtside with Magic Johnson. That game was part of grassroots partnership that NBA's got with France leading up to the Olympics that are going to be in Paris in 2024. I'll also can't be in, I don't know, is that like a normal thing to go to Fashion Week and then hit the studio?
I feel like
Clips.
it is. That's a
Yeah.
vibe.
So we saw clips on social media of he in the studio with Pusha. Pusha did let us know last year that he said this after it's almost dry, he was going to be releasing music at a higher clip. We all heard about the Rumor Gangster Girls album. So excited to hear what came from those sessions. But also interesting to see P in the studio while in Paris with Coi Leray,
I
which
was excited about that low key.
I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at it. I like, her songs are catchy. I mean, she's just part of this new TikTok generation where stuff's
Yeah.
going up there. But I'm low key excited about it too. I like her energy. Like I used twinning them on a reel with my nephew at Christmas time. We were basically looking dressed alike. And then that player song has gotten a lot of love recently, obviously for the regular version, but then the DJ that mixed the audio, I mean the vocals onto Busta, Put Your Hands on My Eyes Could See was a smash.
Yeah.
Smash.
Yeah. What
All
a
right,
hit.
moving on to other current events. So the boy, my guy, Aubrey. So last night he just had his B-side show in Harlem, which was looked pretty dope. Like he did some of the underrated hits that people don't necessarily hear him perform. Brought out Dipset, which I thought was cool. Good show and love to Harlem while you're in Harlem. I thought that was dope. But
Absolutely.
the reason why we're talking about the boy is because they released the video for song Jumbotron shit popping. And in the video, Drake is wearing a bunch of chains that he apparently brought from the Jupiter auction. So
Mm-hmm.
seems harmless, but obviously the internet's going to make a big deal of most things that happen in the Drake world. So let's talk about it. People were confused because they didn't even know what Jupiter was, right? So they just see him with a bunch of Pharrell's chains on, like, damn,
Right.
is Pharrell going broke? Did he sell his chains? Because
Uh-huh.
so no reminder for everyone, Jupiter is Pharrell cleansing his past, donated that money to charity. But for some other people, they see this for what is usually Drake's MO in public is just being the petty king, right?
Correct.
We know that Drake had beef with another member of the family, not Pharrell specifically, but the previously mentioned Pusha T,
Yeah.
Terrence Thornton. And so the reason why, if people pay attention and thought deeper into this, was because there's a line from a song called Omerta, which came out like very soon after Scorpion and all the Pusha, like the height of the Pusha beef, where Drake says, "I plan to buy your most personal belongings when they up for auction. Man, truth be told, I think about it often. The petty king, the overseer of many things." So if you want to, you can say that maybe this is him living those lyrics out in some way, even though it's not Push's jewelry. I think that's a stretch. Let's just let it be what it is. Drake being a fan, showing love and support.
Hard disagree. All right, I'm gonna step in here because I feel like Vaughn has a tendency to soften things a little bit. Drake is a villain. I'm a Drake fan. Don't get me wrong. I got my qualms with him recently, but like I'm a fan of his music. He's a villain though. Like he's positioned himself to be a villain. He is a fanboy. That's not incorrect, but I feel like in this situation, it's very Drake TM peak behavior. I think he is really good at understanding how the internet is going to react to things, if nothing else. So even if he got him because he likes them, like he understands that like he's under such a lens where like people are dissecting his every move. So I don't feel like that was just arbitrary, just because like, oh, I love Pharrell so much.
Yeah.
I can't vibe with the like, it seems harmless. It doesn't seem harmless. It's Drake, but funny, yes.
So, I mean, ultimately, the Jupiter account and Pharrell's accounts on social either shared the video clip or commented or something to just make it seem like it was some kind of they commented with positive responses. So just which make you believe that publicly it needs to be viewed, or they view it as a nod, as respect. So behind the scenes, if there's, I don't know, maybe, maybe we'll hear some music that will either confirm or deny. Or maybe the fact that we won't hear music about it means that it's confirmed. But if we do hear music about it, maybe it's you who's right and you are being more realistic and I'm just being more. All right, what a perfect segue. Perfect segue into why we're here today. All right.
Oh, wow. I am opening my notebook.
Okay, so this February, on February 2nd, will be the 5th anniversary of one of the most polarizing albums in the Neptunes universe. Justin Randall Timberlake's Man of the Woods was released in 2018, and we are here to discuss it at length. First off, got to give a shout out to the homie Aisha for being on the show last year and calling us both out for saying that we need to revisit the album. So we both did it, and I think that, and we're going to tell you how we feel about it, okay? All right, before we get into it, let me go a little bit of background. So this is JT's 5th studio album. The singles were Filthy, Supplies, and Say Something. Obviously, this, like I mentioned, is a polarizing album because it's, because of JT's non-music stuff that we have with him. And then obviously because it was so very different than the previous albums, opening him up to alienate some of his, Black fans, R&B fans who basically became fans of him because of how deeply rooted the music before was in R&B and that kind of vibe. Specifically on Justified and Future Sex Love Sounds. And even on the 2020, I think like those are very soulful projects.
Yeah.
So this album is very experimental, mixture of R&B and funk. And then something that I discovered is called Americana. Do you know what that is, Will?
Yeah, I do.
I had no idea what that was.
So my family's from West Virginia. So I'm a little closer to country than you might think on the offset.
Wait. So your family's from West Virginia. You know what Americana is, and you still feel the way you feel about this album?
Oh, man. Absolutely.
Oh man.
Absolutely.
This is great context. Let's go. So describe for what Americana is from your personal, like what you look to it as from being someone who's experienced it.
I would say Americana is kind of like a subsection of country. I think it's a little like country is attributed to like a lot of storytelling. Americana in my eyes is just like more of the basic elements of country and some of the ways that you develop music. Like there's a song on this album that we'll get into that's like it almost sounds like a nursery rhyme. I feel like Americana leans more that way. It's like really simplistic music, country roots, that kind of thing.
So what I saw, it was described as a mixture of music with roots in the South, folk, gospel, blues, country, and jazz.
Yeah.
Around the time the album came out, JT is quoted as saying, "It sounds more like where I've come from than any other music I've ever made. It's Southern American music, but I want to make it sound modern." So he also described it as Americana music with 808s, which is exactly what I think most of the album is, especially the ones that P and Chad got their hands on. We also have to say this is an important note for the context of this album and the connection reconnection of JT getting back with the Neptunes. This was the first time they got back together to collaborate since the whole Jive Records label drama with the Clips back in 2006. So like that's a huge gap of, this collaboration between an artist who went solo and some people who helped him make a splash and really launch his solo career to having this drama. And then over 10 years later, you don't get like, it took 12 years to get this project. I think they recorded in 2016, so like exactly 10 years
Yeah.
back together. So that's crazy. And I think that that's important to note, in the context of how we analyze or criticize the collaborations between P and Chad and Justin Randall. So ultimately, it's a good album. That's what we're here to discuss. Let's get into it.
All right, let's go.
Okay, so the first song called "Filthy." What are your thoughts, Vogue? Go ahead. You can start it off because I want you to go ahead.
Yep. So Filthy. Here's the thing. I liked Filthy enough. I will say at the top of the album, my critique of a lot of the songs is like they felt like they were imitating somebody else. This Filthy feels a lot like Robin Thicke. It feels like a throwaway track from him. Who we know like around this time or like a little bit before was working with the Neptunes a lot. I also like immediately I understand Justin's attempts with this album to like bridge these two different worlds of like Americana R&B, but like lines like haters gonna say it's fake and we ain't leaving till 6 a.m. I'm like, it feels, I'm gonna say this like 50 times on this episode, it feels try hard. So like it has a great funk to it. I like it. But I was just like, it feels like you're really like feels like he's trying to put a square peg in a round hole.
Okay.
A little bit for me.
So I will say I thought this was I like the energy of this song to start the album off. I think as you get into the rest of the album, it's almost like he's connecting. It does have, I think, very similar future sex love songs. This is produced by Timbo and Danger, so it has that vibe. It's almost like he's setting us up to be excited about that before he drags us into the woods. Like, and not like I said, I didn't mean to say like that, like he's about to murder us, but like he's getting us excited for JT music, and then we're going to the woods. So just to give some more context into the production and the creation of this song, "Filthy," like I said, produced by Timbo and Danger. It credits Lawrence Dobson, who most people will know him from 1500 to Nothing, a collective from LA, musical collective, creative collective that you have heard collab with a lot of LA artists, Nipsey, Snoop, Game. He actually worked with Justin with Just Blaze on the drums for the Game's Why You Hate the Game on the Doctor Advocate album. But the collective has done a lot of touring. I think they might have actually like been the tour band for some big artists, like including Jay-Z. But another member of that collective is James Fauntleroy, who people will also know and recognize his musical impact over the last decade. I think probably the most impactful, or not impactful, but recognized collab. Here we go again. We'll bring back the boy. Girls Love Beyonce. James Fauntleroy. Girls Love Beyonce, man. But James Fauntleroy actually co-wrote every song on the 2020 Experience by JT, which I think is a big deal. To also add context to this song specifically, and again, it connecting the old with and setting us up for being dragged into the woods. So I also want to talk about, it's a quote from Danger when the album came out. He said, "I remember walking into the studio and I'm like, so what's the vibe?" And Justin just raised his hands up like, "This is the vibe." And what he had on was a flannel, some Adidas, some jeans. He had his beard and a Scully on. That was the vibe. And there you go. We're going into the woods. The last thing I want to say about this song is we talked about his Super Bowl performances before. He opened the Super Bowl performance in 2018 with this song. And when we talked about the Super Bowl performances, I recalled that he did the second one. But now after going through this album and researching it, I remembered why I couldn't necessarily like picture his performance at the 2018 Super Bowl is because I was drunk. Like with all capital letters. Like it was definitely like Super Bowl is usually around Justin Tinsley. Shout out my boy Jay Tins, Papa Tins. It's usually around his birthday. And so we literally were in DC. I think we got to DC on Saturday. He had a party on Saturday night. We went to goodness, what's that place? Vogue. Beacon Brunch. You know,
Ah,
oh my
yeah.
goodness. Beacon Brunch all day, sitting there drinking and eating, and then just walked around and ended up in Buffalo Billiards for Super Bowl. And I was,
Buffalo Billiards.
man, I knew that the Eagles won the game, but I cannot even like, oh, perfect time, and I'm in Philly. The Eagles are good again. But anyway, that whole thing, like I remembered that now. I was like, well, that's why I don't have context of this performance because I didn't see it.
Yeah, I also don't remember. I think so. Fun fact about me, if I have the Patriots in the Super Bowl, I'm kind of checked out. Not super interested. So that was one of these years, and I was just like, call me for the commercials. Because I'm a designer, I'm really into the marketing. That's what I was focused on.
I was also really pissed because I'm a Jaguars fan, which no one even believes when I say that. But that was a year that the Patriots like basically stole that game, the previous game, the championship game from the Jaguars. We should have been in that game instead of the Patriots anyway. So I'm glad we lost. But all of that whole story comes together, and just the point of it is I do not remember seeing Justin Timberlake perform because I have been drinking tequila and champagne literally like 10 hours. And so now we move on.
And that brings us to Midnight Summer Jam. So this song, carrying on the theme from before, is where like Neptune's production comes in. You can hear it. It has kind of like the classic Neptune sound, which I appreciate as always. Like they never fail me. I will say this song sounds like Michael Jackson, which if you heard our episode about Justified, makes a lot of sense. I feel like P writes in a way that would have suited Michael very well, and Justin sings at that octave. So I mean, like it's a cool song. Again, he's hitting me with kind of like corny lyrics I don't really appreciate. He's like, act like the South ain't the ish. And I'm like, all right. And then like it goes into a harmonica break that I thought was stupid. It was just like, what is happening?
I mean, this was the first song I heard from the album because again, like I was not checking for it at all when it came
Yeah.
out. And I mean, I think it's good. I think it's good energy for the first two songs. I mean, I think it's funky. I mean, maybe this might have been the only song out of this whole album that could have actually fit on Justified, maybe.
Yeah.
Like just maybe but it wasn't bad. I mean, it does have, like you said, it does have like the could have been from Michael vibes. It does have
Yeah.
like the Earth, Wind, and Fire inspiration kind of funkiness to it. It's
Yeah.
not a bad song.
It's not, I also want to clarify before we continue. Like, I don't hate this album. It was painful, but I don't hate it. It's just like nothing really feels right to me. It doesn't like click for me. And I think that knowing my personal history, I think that's interesting. But, well, we can move on.
All right, next one is Sauce. What you got?
I got beef. If you know me personally, you know what a big Prince fan I am. I was raised on Prince, where everybody has like this huge idolization for Michael Jackson. For me, that's Prince. This song sounds like a Prince song. We also know from what's that song? Give It to Me.
Mm-hmm.
Prince and Justin had a little beef, and Justin called himself calling Prince out. So to have this song that to me sounds so much like Prince, I couldn't enjoy the song. And it also has like this, I think the issue with some of the Americana elements on this album is that they feel pasted in almost.
Mm-hmm.
So like there's a guitar element in this song that was giving me Hold Down. And I was like, I asked myself what was happening on a lot of these tracks. So I'm not a fan of this song. I'm a ride for Prince.
Yeah, this one wasn't one of my favorites. I think it's a cool song though. I mean, this one's Timberland and Danger. I think this is where, like you said, you start to get the elements of the again, like let's give him credit for, like you said, easing into the Americana, right? Like
Yeah.
said, Filthy was like, I'm gonna make y'all feel like this is my usual shit. And then Midnight Summer Jam is like, oh, we're just in a party in the forest. And then, but it's still my regular stuff. But then Sauce is like, I'm trying to make you guys understand we're gonna be in the woods for the whole album. It was the first one, like you said, that started to sound a little bit rock and roll country-ish with the guitars. And
Yeah.
so I didn't hate it. I thought the intro was weird. Like I don't remember where the clip frame. I feel like it came from like a viral clip where it's talking about the difference between juice and sauce, and I was like,
Yeah.
that felt out of place. I do appreciate it, but it felt out of place on this album.
Yeah, I agree. I felt the same way about that.
Okay.
We go into the title track. This is where we hit full yuck, like goofy. I was just like, I it's upset because I like country music. So So I like country music. I don't listen to it a ton, but like what I do like seek it out. I especially seek out like Black country artists, and it just felt like a trope. It feels to me like, here's the thing. What I wish would have happened is that Justin introduced this part of himself to us earlier. And I wondered if that was affecting my ability to connect these two things, because we're fully into like the Americana sound at this point. And I felt like he was assuming this persona that wasn't him.
Right.
And I think, but the way that it's reading is that like he's going back to his roots.
Right.
So I feel like had I known, like I knew where he was from, had I known a little bit more of his connection to this type of sound, maybe I would believe it more.
For sure. I mean, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, we've known this kid, not kid, because he's older than us, but like we've known him since he was a kid, right? Mickey Mouse Club, singing Jersey, right? All the way through NSYNC albums, Justified, all the solo albums. And then it's like, that's almost like 20 years later, bro. We've watched your career as a musician for 20 years. And this is the first time you've taken us to the cabin. And like, I understand your perspective as someone who enjoys that music and has more exposure to that music than I do. Cause I'm just like, oh, this is kind of, you know, I'm going off vibes. I'm 100% off vibes. Like, I mean, the Man in the Woods title tracks is like, watching the video definitely adds to like the vibe of the song and the album, where he's like literally just walking around the forest and he ends up at like a cabin where he's dancing with Jessica Biel, and like it sounds like some barbershop quartet stuff like on Neptune's beat. Like, which is, it's cool. And now we're here. Like, this is the song where it's like, okay, cool. Hey, we're in the woods now. You ready?
Look, there's a chipmunk. Okay, I'm going easy now. We finally arrived at a song that I actually like, and I will replay again on purpose.
Okay.
Higher, Higher. Again, so this is the first wave of Neptune songs. Tracks like 4 through 7 are all Neptunes produced. Higher, Higher is where it really kind of hooks me, and I'm like, okay, I genuinely like this. The bridge is kind of, but I'll give the song credit that like I liked this song.
Yeah, Higher Higher is cool. I didn't really have that many comments on it. Like, it's a cool Neptune song. It's very, it definitely leans more on the blues side of the Americana vibes. Like, it's cool. I don't nothing crazy about it, but I think it's a solid song. I don't really have that much to say about Wave either. I thought Wave was okay, but not like
Wave was the first song that stood out to me. So I listened to this album more than once because I knew that I was coming in with bias. So I was like, listen to it more than once, stop tripping. But again, like I wrote down isolated country elements feel tacked on to a lot of the songs. And it goes on too long. Like I think one element of Americana, like Americana is linked to this concept of like American pie, simplistic living. Right. And it has this repeated refrain in the song. And I wanted it to stop. Gotcha. He repeated it way too many times. It was too repetitive. But Supplies was actually a single.
Yeah, Supplies is my favorite.
Okay.
I think
it is fire.
Supplies is just it's just like very much, you know, I think it might just be the best version of him combining the two, like Americana with the modern Neptunes 808s. I think just the bass line is very hip hop and strong. Like it's definitely, you know, but it's still got that bluegrass, some guitar or some kind of other instrument in it that you still know that we're in the woods, but you know, and even his delivery on it is still very matter of fact. Like it's a folksy like cadence, like
it is,
but it works though. I think Supplies is the best. Like I said, Supplies is the best combination of the modern Neptune sound with the Americana vibes he's going to. So
yeah, I can agree with that. I didn't love it personally, but I think it's more about like my perception of his delivery than the actual delivery. The delivery was on par with what he was aiming for. Right. If nothing else, he like achieved his goal with this album.
Right.
I just don't know if I liked it. The next song is Morning Light with Alicia Keys. I do like a good Alicia Keys feature. It's cool. It's like a nice love song.
Yeah, it was a cool song. I mean, I liked it. Like co-written by Chris Stapleton, who will come on this out. We'll mention a little bit later. You know, Alicia, I think gets in her pocket with stuff like this. Yeah. I thought, you know, a lot of people may have missed the collab that, speaking of Prince, right? The collab that Justin and Alicia had. Alicia redid How Come You Don't Call Me.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really good, produced by Neptunes. Go check that out if you have not heard that song. But yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was, you know, it was very much the vibe. Like, I think those are the themes in the album is I'm from the country, I'm in love, I'm in country love. So, I mean, like,
I'm in country love.
That's what this song to me is like. The morning light is the light waking up in the cabin, and it's like, oh, what's that thing that people go to? That's like it became popular like right around this time, where it's like you go into this box in the woods. You
Ooh,
know what I'm talking about?
yep.
It's
It's like the
like a thing that
getaway
people.
house.
Yes, that's what that reminds me of. You wake up in a getaway house.
Yep.
It's just a big window, no TV, no electricity, just the morning light looking at you.
That's a good characterization of the song. Yeah, I mean, that's cool. I stopped having as much beef towards the middle of the album. I think because he did establish his theme so well, and I was just like, well, here we are. But the song I will speak most highly of, unfortunately, is not a Neptunes beat, but Say Something with Chris Stapleton is a banger.
This
I
is a
love
really good song. It's a really good song.
I love it. It's the most authentic song on the album. I felt his connection to where he was from. I felt like it was very sincere. And I feel like it is telling that there is a country music star on the song
Yeah.
that kind of like grounded him in that performance.
Yeah, and I think that like we talk about Supplies being the best of him merging the Neptune sound, modern sound with Americana. I think this is just him the best version of just a straight up modern Americana song, right?
Yeah.
Like I could not name any other Chris Stapleton songs, but I really enjoyed Chris Stapleton's part of it. Like he doesn't sound like your traditional like down home country singer. Like he sounds like he's got some soul in the way that he's delivering his part of that song, which I thought was dope. But wanted to mention that Chris Stapleton and JT had collaborated a few times. Like Drink You Away was part of 2020 Experience Part 2, which came out in 2013, but they ended up performing at the Country Music Awards in 2015. And that kind of like put the song back on the charts, which was on the country chart specifically. And that made me go back to 2020 overall. Like I thought 2020 Part 1 was amazing, top to bottom, but I had forgotten some of the highlights of Part 2. Like Take
Yeah.
Back the Night was everywhere when it came out. Drake is on Cabaret. Thought it was a really good song. Unless I don't want people to think that I am like anti-Drake. I'm just he's in a different space now, and I don't know if we are in the same space. But but I love that song. I thought Drake's verse on Cabaret was amazing. Jay-Z feature on the song Murder. So like part two had some hits, include if you add Drink You Away too. Like part two was a little bit slept on in comparison because part one was so good. Like
Yeah.
part one was amazing.
That's the other thing about this album, though. Like, this is a guy who, and so out of curiosity, I looked up how this album performed. So I was like, this has to be a singular opinion that, like, I feel so strongly in the negative leaning. Because it performed really well. It was another platinum hit, that kind of thing. So, like, this album did well commercially, but he has this run of albums directly beforehand that are so musically sound, like Justified, Future Sex Love Sounds, 2020 Experience. Like these are, I would say, like elite class albums. So I just felt like this didn't measure up. Like I'm all for artists evolving, but like the quality of this just wasn't as high for me.
Right. Man. I mean, the way that Pusher Lover Girl comes on
Woo!
man. But as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about how he did give us a heads up though, because the people, I guess there's a musical collective that worked on that album with him called the Tennessee Kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's kind of like maybe in his mind it was more of a connection and a bridge, a logical connection and bridge that maybe we missed. But I do think about that now and it makes sense. But so even though Timbo and Danger only have 4 songs on the album, I think it's important to note too, and part of the reason why we love this song, Say Something specifically, is because Timbo has his history. Obviously, he's a country boy from Virginia. Let's put that out there. Gotta make sure we show the Virginia love every time I get a chance. But he has a history of doing this Americana type work in his like in the hip hop space, right? Like think about all those Bubba Sparks songs that were like those were basically Americana hip hop, like in their own way. Like when we think about Deliverance and like Jimmy Mathis, like and even the joint with Bubba and JT that we talked about before, Hoot Nanny. Like Timbo, I think deserves the credit for having that history, and I think that is why we think this is the best song on this album. Like, overall, this is the best song, period.
I would agree. One thing I want to say before we move on, if you're not familiar with Chris Stapleton, I would say his biggest, most known hit is probably Tennessee Whiskey. So I'm assuming that most listeners of this podcast are not familiar with Chris Stapleton. So I'm gonna give them that. If you want to like explore, get your like toes wet in country, go listen to that song.
Shout out to Chris Stapleton. Like when I saw a picture of him, so I was like, yo, this is exactly okay. This makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, next song is an interlude where it's Jessica Biel talking about wearing JT's flannel. And I think like it's something that JT mentioned talking about this album is like he kind of incorporates Jessica Biel throughout the album as like a voice of consciousness, like the ghost. She's the person, the voice that you're following into the woods. So
Yeah.
that's like that makes sense. Like it's almost like this kind of again, you talk about country music being the story, right? That's kind of like the story that in the
Yeah.
journey that we're on is like have this party, follow the voice into the woods, and then
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. I think on a different podcast, I could do a whole episode about people who do albums when they're in love. Cause I think that like being in love with somebody creates a very specific sound. And I feel like that happens here, which I appreciate. I actually say that the song that follows the interlude, Flannel, obviously, I actually like that song a lot. This is the song I was talking about, feels like it's a nursery rhyme at the start. I feel like it's a really good
yeah.
representation of Americana. I like this song. So I feel like this song also a Neptunes produced track, and
Yep.
it does the combo really well. And like you said, the narrative voice of the album shines through.
Yep, I think this is another good example of the modern hip hop sound of the Neptunes with the bluegrass country-ish type of ballad from JT. And it's so funny that you say it sounds like a nurture rhyme. Like I think about that too when I heard it. And I randomly last night, I don't even know what we were talking about, but I started singing The Farmer and the Dell. And Kia had no idea what I was talking about. I had to play it for her. And I was like, but that's the type of kind of sing-songy pattern that he's kind of on in this flannel when you hear the
Yeah.
riding. I don't want to sing because I sound crazy. But go check that one out. I think that's definitely a good description of what that song and the vibes that song gives you.
Okay.
Next song is Montana. So again, we just talked about the whole concept of Jessica Biel and them being in love and how this is kind of one of the main themes of the album.
She's
Montana is
from
actually where he proposed to her, and he said that they spent a lot of time there and they loved that place. So that's why after the song was written, it's kind of a love song to her, and he's like, oh, I'll just call it Montana. So again,
mm,
Jessica Biel and their love and marriage theme coming up again on that song.
yeah. I incorrectly said she's from there. She's from Minnesota, but we get the vibe. I like Montana. It has a nice groove. I think most of my commentary for the rest of the album is I will say I think after Say Something, the rest of the album doesn't feel as try hard. I think it says something about the sequencing. And I do agree with you that it feels like at the outset he's trying to pull you in,
Right.
like create a bridge from where he came from. I almost would have preferred if he didn't do that.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need the integration of hip hop to be able to understand the rest of the album.
Right. Okay.
We
Next.
into your track now.
I don't know what it is about the song. Like the energy just makes me want to like, I don't know. Breeze Off the Pond is my shit, yo. Like to me, like listening to it again, Breeze Off the Pond gives me like it's Neptunes and JT doing their Americana shit with a little bit of a sprinkle of like Daft Punk, Get Lucky. You know what I mean? It's like a little bit of funky, like the bass. Yeah, I don't know. It's got good energy. I like it. Breeze Off the Pond, man. Like just yeah, I don't know. I started off the Zoom call with that and just to piss Vogue off. But I like that. I like that song a lot.
The next song after that is actually the last Neptunes produced track on this album, "Living Off the Land." No standout comments from me. It's a cool song.
Yeah. I think again, like I think that what you just said about how it makes more sense, the concept makes more sense after Say Something.
Yeah,
I think they're just in a groove where
yeah,
it's not as experimental, it's more cohesive, but at the same time, with it being less experimental, it's not really these songs don't stand out as much.
right. I agree.
For good or bad reasons, right? Like they don't stand out because you hate them because they're forced, or they don't stand out because they're too experimental. So I felt the same way about hard stuff. There wasn't really I didn't really like hard stuff a lot. There wasn't really anything in it that kind of grabbed me. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
No, the last two tracks I kind of just breezed by both times. I was like, okay, cool, we're done.
And that's
And
unfortunately a theme, right? Like that's how we felt about Justified. The
yeah,
last song about Justified, right?
yeah, he doesn't finish strong. What I'll say about this album, like I said, I don't hate it. So Aisha, thank you for this experience. I think that a conversation that happens a lot for people that like music is how much does how you feel about a person or how you feel about like what a person says or does, how much does that affect your perception of the music? And a lot of people feel like it shouldn't affect it at all. the music should stand kind of like its own entity. And like I agree to the degree of really good music, unfortunately, stands alone. But it's kind of like this mid level music that answers to how you feel about the person. Like, I'm not somebody who I don't, we talked about Super Bowl. I don't have those feelings about Justin Timberlake about that. I just feel like there came a point in his career where it feels a little bit more inauthentic. And this album was a representation of that for me.
I mean, I think just important to note, Young Man is really basically a song dedicated to his son.
Yeah.
And, it has Jessica Biel on it, has like some, words from his son on there too. But, so the album, his son is, so first of all, like this is some really country shit to name your son Silas, like a baby boy in the 2010s. But Silas actually is the name of the album though. So Silas, Latin translation means man of the forest. So this album is basically named after him, which I think overall to me, after listening to it like a couple times in a row and doing the research and hearing him talk, like seeing the quotes of him talk about it and knowing that it's named after his son and having Jessica Biel on it, I realized that like that's one of the albums that you get to have the luxury of doing when you're at that level where it's like, yo, this is not a really for y'all. It's for me and my family. And if y'all like it, cool. But if you don't, that's cool too. And I appreciated that. Like it's really love song to his family about being loved and being in a good space, talking about his roots in Tennessee. Like it makes sense. And like I may not like we may not go back and listen to it front to back like we do Justified. Like that's okay. Like the Neptune songs that I love are great. Like Say Something is cool, but I think I definitely have more appreciation for it now after we've spent this time listening to it and talking about it today, where it's just like you got to understand that it is what it is and it is what it is for a reason. And it's cool that it's not like what you wanted it to be. And that's the hard part of what you're saying is like for us to really step out of that from a creative standpoint is understanding like, yeah, like we can like artists, but don't have to always like all of their art.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. And I also I think I feel a little less like you do. I agree with your stance of, this album's not for us. And I feel like musicians have the right to make albums that are for them. And I feel like you did a really good job of that. I feel like it's a really strong concept. What I will say is for the same reason of like we've done this research, I've been listening to it for like a day. I have processed it in a way that like sometimes I don't like when I have to over process an album to like it. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't want to have to dig into the history and like read a book about it to like the album.
For sure.
It should stand on its own. But I think there's a lot of merit to it. I think that like his intention is there. I don't hate it. What I'll say.
I mean, I don't know what it is though. I don't know why. I'm trying to take myself back to 2018 and figure out like why I didn't give it a chance as much as I don't know. There's got to be some kind of reason for that. Like I don't even remember when it came out or being excited about it. Like I don't know.
Can't speak for you back then, but what I'll say for me is exactly what I was talking about. It's like unintentionally, I'm gonna assume it's unintentional. Unintentionally, Justin has kind of like done this posturing where like he's trying to represent where he's from and who he is, but it has simultaneously pushed away the community that represented that like supported him the most.
Right.
So like the arguments about my album, the R&B award and stuff like that, like I think it left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, and it made it hard to be excited about his music moving forward.
Right.
For me, I think that's what it was.
Maybe it might have been marketed as this country album in the first place, and I was just like, okay, cool, I'm not listening to that.
Like I do remember being like that. I do remember that because I remember being like, what? Where did this come from? So the marketing, if I'd be interested to know, we'll never know if they would have gone a less direct route on the marketing, if it would have been better received by certain parties.
Right. Okay. But top 3 tracks.
Top 3 tracks for me are, I would say, Higher, Higher, Flannel, and Montana. Yeah. Oh, I was going Neptune's tracks. Higher, Higher, Say Something, and Montana.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Supplies, Breeze Off the Pond, Say Something.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to JT.
Don't beat your feet ever again.
Shout out to JT. Shout out to Jessica Biel. Shout out to Young Silas. Thank you for this album to give us something to talk about today.
This was a fun episode. I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got some highlights, and it definitely was warranting of a healthy discussion.
Yuck.
So for that, we're appreciative. Everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Neptune Sunday. Please stay tuned. Make sure to follow the Twitter at Neptune Sunday. Subscribe on Apple and Spotify. We'll catch you next Neptune Sunday. We're just getting started. It's still early 2023. We got a lot more planned. Don't miss it.
I gotta say this for the end of the episode. It's my birthday tomorrow. It's not actually tomorrow, but it's next week.
Yes. So everyone, just be prepared to send. We'll make sure that you guys have Vogue's Cash App for her birthday.
Woo! Or send me your favorite Neptunes track. I'll take that too.
So appreciate y'all listening. Catch y'all next Neptune Sunday. Peace and love.